This is episode number 28. I think we're going to have some pretty interesting things that we're going to be talking about tonight.
Yeah, definitely. We're excited to have you out. We're going to be talking about Georgia. We've talked about some pre-auctions or viewed them before the auction took place. We're actually going to go through and review some sold results. And then we're going to talk about bank sales, a little bit about the foreclosures and also some REOs that are available, and kind of explain the opportunity that's taking place right now with the foreclosure market in addition to tax sales.
Yeah, after that, we're going to go and look at some pre-sale opportunities here in a couple different places here. We may look at West Virginia, although I'm not sure if we're going to look there. Maybe a couple different places here. We're also going to look at some bad deal reviews from Georgia as well. And after that, we'll also be taking questions as well. So you guys are welcome to ask questions here throughout.
Yeah, exactly. We also want to give a special thanks to anyone that's on the call this evening, our coaching members, any of our program members, subscribers, YouTube followers. We appreciate you guys coming to us for learning more about tax liens and tax deeds. So we definitely appreciate all of you.
Yeah, it's great to have you out. Now, we're going to talk about some of the sales happening here for within Georgia. Now, is it Chatham? I hope I'm saying that right. Oh, I should have looked that up beforehand. Maybe you guys have to tell me if I'm saying that right. If it's Chatham, Chatham or Chat, yeah, it's got to be Chatham. If we're saying that wrong, you can probably tell us there, and we'll note it there. But Georgia, how does it operate as a state? So it is a redemption deed state, kind of like Texas in some ways. In that they still hold auctions every single month, but there's some differences in that they have a 1-year redemption period on the property, and so versus Texas, which a lot of the properties there are going to have 6 months. So you have 1-year redemption period in Georgia. You also have a couple of different types of sales. They have judicial sales and non-judicial sales that they hold there. The non-judicial sales are the deeds that have the 1-year redemption period. So at the end of those, you actually still have to kind of extinguish their right of redemption. But those are for the non-judicial sales. But the judicial sales are properties that have a shorter redemption period of 60 days. But they're, I guess, not available everywhere or not always happening, I guess, as we've looked for them.
Yeah, well, counties have a couple of different choices. There's counties out there that will have nothing but non-judicial auctions. There's some counties now that only have judicial auctions. And then there's counties that have a combination of both. So it's really going to depend on the county on which method they're going to use. But with the non-judicial, these are your normal Georgia tax deeds that people have been talking about for decades, where you have a 1-year redemption period. You're not going to have any ownership rights. And then when you buy that, you're going to have to go ahead and extinguish their right to redeem. So you kind of got to go through kind of like a little bit of a mini foreclosure there at the end to reserve your right. And then there's going to be these states that or counties that are doing the non-judicial sale. And this is where you're going to have the opportunity where they're only going to have a 60-day redemption period. And at the end of the 60-day redemption period, you're not going to have to go through the process of redeeming on their right to foreclose because it's went through this judicial foreclosure.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting how they've got both of those here. And how if it does go through the judicial, then you don't have to go through, removing their right to redeem. But if it's a non-judicial, you basically have to do that. You basically kind of, in a way, kind of foreclose at the end.
Yeah, to a degree. And so what's kind of interesting, if you're looking underneath this is just for Henry County, Georgia, but decided to include it. It talks about how when we're talking about these judicial sales, that the title will vest absolutely into the purchaser after the right of redemption. So after that 60 days, eliminating the need for post-sale barment, which is essentially kind of like that foreclosing on their right to redeem. And also it says, and quiet title action. Now, I don't know how true that is. We haven't tested that, but that is interesting that, that it's possible that you might not even need to go through quiet title. So you would probably need to consult an attorney on that because I'm not sure about it, but that's what they're claiming from the county. And the county usually is not going to put something like that unless it's going to be true. They have these looked over by their attorneys, but in this particular county, they have both kind of sales.
Yeah,
So
that's interesting too. That'd be huge, at least as far as what they say there, with barring, the need for quiet title action. That would be awesome.
yeah, yeah. So it's kind of interesting. This is something that's just been happening the last couple of years with these judicial foreclosures, which means that they take it through the court process. There's going to be more involved with it, and in a lot of ways, you're getting a cleaner title than you would, and you're going to get that pretty quickly within 60 days. That, or you're going to make 20%. So, you know, from what we've seen in counties that do a combination of both, they're going to have kind of the better properties with that judicial foreclosure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's go ahead and take a look at the county. In fact, what was kind of interesting is I know these guys have had at least one sale, but none of these had any dates on them. And so the first ones that I was able to pull up with was this one here in November.
That's interesting.
And I don't know if they just didn't post them, but they didn't have anything there. But this is where I could get some of the sale results. So the first property we're going to look at is this one right here. And we can see some of the details on it right here. Now, one thing that we were talking about with our coaching students when we were going through stage 1 due diligence is reviewing this assessment information. But here in the case, we may have photos of it. You can see all of these different things here that are going to give us additional information on it.
Yeah, there we go. So we've got a photo of the house from
2024.
2024. So a couple of years old here, but not too old.
Yeah, we can kind of get an idea of the value of it. And here's the property located right here. So, I was kind of wondering how good a deal could this really be, but you can see it's a lot nicer homes right next to it. I mean, some of these are newer homes right here, pretty new homes. So it's this one right here, and they valued it at about 192,000. So it was picked up for 44,000 and valued about 192. And in looking at, if you were to really do a nice rehab on this, something like an addition, these homes right here are like $300,000 to $400,000 homes plus.
And how much did this sell for again?
It sold for 47.
So 47,000. Wow, that sold for really not very much. I mean, it sold for a very low percentage of value here.
Yeah, I mean it's gonna need work, but I think that if it was rehabbed and maybe you even put I think with the value of the property next to it, it'd be worth even doing something like an addition on it. Or you could just turn around and sell it for 120 grand and make 60, 70 grand on it quick.
Yeah, and I was just looking. I saw, a question from Greg about this. Now, I think this sale that we're looking at here, this one is one of their non-judicial sales, right? Regular non-judicial sale.
I
Uh,
should have looked that up, but I believe it was a non-judicial sale.
and
I'd have to check to make it 100% sure on that.
yeah, well, it was interesting because even the judicial sales do have kind of an opportunity there for redemption here, and the rate of return is still pretty good. In fact, it seemed like it was. We're gonna have to dig into that a little
20%.
bit more here. Yeah,
20%.
20%. It seems like is that a flat rate?
Yeah, it's going to be a flat rate. So, in fact, we're going to look at some properties here in a little bit, some land where you can see it already redeemed and this person made 20% on their money.
Nice, nice. Yeah, in fact, yeah. So like Greg was basically asking if they were kind of like a lien, in a way, but in a way you can kind of control your redemption period a bit, with the judicial sale properties, and that probably is kind of true to a degree where you certainly are dealing with a shorter 60-day redemption period instead, but you probably have a higher chance of it not redeeming though than you would with the normal lien. At least how liens are like 95% redemption and then 5% you own. You probably have at least a 50-50 shot of owning these properties, I would think.
Oh, yeah. Well, especially with the 60-day. When I was looking through the 60-day, I think that because they've already gone through a full judicial foreclosure, which means that there was, they've already they've already foreclosed on their right to redeem and everything. In fact, they're claiming that you could get quiet title with it. So it's closer to buying a property on the open market in some ways. Sure, there's a chance they're going to redeem, but if they haven't got redeemed, essentially the 1 year redemption period is already up to a degree.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, that
they
makes
just have
sense.
60 days to get it back in case, the redemption is over. So, in that case, I think that they've got a pretty good chance of getting most of them.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a pretty nice property that we were just looking at. Is that it?
This is the one that sold here right here for $17,000.
Holy cow. That
You
was
know,
a steal.
yeah, really good. You can see there are a lot of manufactured homes within the area, so it kind of fits within it. And the county's value, or Redfin's valuing at 205. You can see it's on a good half-acre lot, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. So this, built in 2002. So in this case, the investors either going to get the chance to be able to acquire this property for $17,000, or they're going to be able to get 20% on their money. And if it redeems within a few months, you've made that 20% pretty quickly.
Yeah, well, and in buying it, I mean, at that price, they paid less than 10% for it if they can win it at that. I mean, if they can acquire the property at that, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what they essentially want it for. So we'll have to see if it doesn't redeem or not. But you can see that there is some opportunity within these. And I think part of the reason this one's sold so high is because of the neighborhood.
And I wonder if 20% is that, I wonder if they're setting that here on the sales price here, or are they setting that on the value of the property, I wonder.
I believe it's off the total amount. I'd have to go back and
Okay,
look
yeah,
100%
that would make
sure.
sense though. That's kind of like how Texas does it off of the total amount, so that would make sense.
Yeah. So the next one we're going to look at is this October sale. And we're going to look at this one right here. This sold for 51 grand.
Yeah, interesting. So we can see, yeah, it's got an address there. We can see the owner.
Yeah, it's this house right here. Not quite as good a neighborhood as the last one, but not bad.
Oh
And,
wow,
valued at 242.
that's another one where they paid just a very small percentage of value. I mean, they paid under 20% on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, got it for a pretty good deal.
Yeah, I guess right around 20%. Thinking here, but yeah, that's an excellent deal. The one before that was another excellent deal. Both of those are kind of fixer uppers, but they were picked up for, I mean, the first one for 17 and that one for
Yeah,
51.
yeah, for 51, valued at 242. So let's say once it's completely rehabbed, done nice, it's worth 250. And, they picked it up for 51. They could put nearly 100 grand into rehabbing it and still make 100 grand profit.
Yeah, that's pretty comfortable numbers.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we're trying to show with some of these properties that we've been looking through lately is that, if you can make $100,000 with the deal and you can do it, fairly smoothly and quickly, that's going to be a pretty good return on your money. And you do that a few times a year, and that could be a difference for a lot of us.
Yeah,
So the
yeah,
next one we're going to look at is this one right here. This sold for 50,000. And that's actually this commercial building right here. Now, I didn't look into a whole lot of comps on it. I don't really know kind of what the value is. We could take a look at the county and see
but
what
it's
the
it's
county
in it's
says.
in Savannah, Georgia, is where it's located at.
Yeah. Deed Company LLC. That's a pretty basic name.
Yeah,
We can look into the history of it. So, I mean, they're valuing it at 256, 287.
Yeah, that makes
Is it
sense.
income property? You know, we could take a quick look at the photos and see what their newest photos are.
Oh, it's a different property.
That is a different property. That's kind of interesting. I wonder if they got the wrong property or if the address is wrong, because all the information comes up on that. Unless I'm looking across the street.
It could be. It could be the one right next door. To the right, maybe, or it could be across the street.
Because it says income property. I think the photo's wrong. I could be wrong about that, but I think the photo's wrong because it says it's commercial property.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
it wouldn't be the
take a
first
look
time
at
we've
the
seen.
permits.
It wouldn't be the first time that we've seen county records be wrong about something like that.
You know, we can see that there were some renovations done in 2005. Underneath the permits.
Oh, in fact, you can see about how much too, which is nice. You can see, they say about 10,000 that they're
Yeah.
putting into it, 10,000, 20,000, 2,000.
Yeah, so that's this is a little one of those things where we'd do a little bit more research. And one thing we could do easy is we could just check the map too, the GIS map to back up where it's located. And that might be able to tell us. Huh.
It kind of
But
looks like it's a house in the middle of
yeah, it
somewhere.
does.
Maybe it's not that commercial property. Maybe it's the house in the image.
Yeah, that's interesting. Wow. Well, we do some more research on it. Either way, if it's the house or it's not the house, it ended up selling for.
Yeah, for 50,000. If that was a house, that house looks pretty nice.
Yeah. Yeah, we'd have to do some more research on that. Sold for 50. I just looked up the address quick as we were going through them.
Yeah, that's funny. It's interesting. Well, and it was definitely a screaming deal.
Well, and that's where due diligence comes in. We would have, as we were going through all the stages, we'd kind of figure that out. So the next one we're going to look at, let me erase this. So the county valued it. I was thinking that maybe this is kind of a little comparable, but it may not even be the commercial property. So this next one here is, let me see. I think it's this one.
One that sold for 49,000. Yeah, on Kessler Avenue.
Oh, I was looking at this one first. This one right here, you can see how it didn't have a purchase price. So I didn't know if that's where I kind of made a mistake. Look at it. It was this one right here, but I was wondering, did nobody bid on it? Did it somehow get redeemed? Because if it get redeemed, why did they keep it on that list? So I thought that was kind of interesting that, this one opened up at only 3,800, but it didn't have a purchase price, which I'd normally think, well, that means that it must have been some kind of junk property, but it appears to be this house right here, valued at 224,000. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I wonder. Well, and they have it listed as excess proceeds money there. Like, yeah, I wonder what they're doing. Maybe they'll resell it. In fact, that's one of the things I noticed there with some of the Texas places was that more and more of the counties, were listing below their regular list. They would have listed their resale properties. Some of the places didn't really separate them though.
Yeah. This property right here ended up selling for 49,000.
That's so it's in a little cul-de-sac there.
Yeah, they might be going. This might be the wrong road. It could be that one. They're valuing it at 218. Built in 1980. That's where I'm kind of wondering. That didn't look like a 1980 to me. That looks like older. I think this may
Yeah.
be the wrong street. I think that was part of the problem when I tried looking it up before.
Yeah, well, in any case, we know that they picked it up for 25% of value, roughly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, there's plenty of good profit there, and we could figure out exactly. That would be part of the thing to figure it out. But it looks like a home built in 1980, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,200 square feet. In fact, we could probably easily figure out exactly which one it is by looking at the county. That's one thing that's nice when counties do have photos. Even if it's older, we can verify exactly which house it is.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was a different property there.
Yeah. So nice little brick home, this was back in 2024. They were still mowing it, but I wonder if it was currently being lived in or not. And we'll look at one more property, which I kind of thought was a little interesting. It was this one right here, 6,700. Oh, 67,000, excuse me.
Oh, we also see that the person's deceased.
Yeah, in fact, I'm glad you pointed that out, because a bunch of these, that one's deceased. This one was deceased. 2 on the other list we were looking at was deceased. It was
Oh yeah.
amazing how many people, were deceased on these lists.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, yeah, it was like half the properties here, they had somebody listed that was deceased.
Yeah, this is actually this lot back here. What I thought was kind of interesting is you can see how they've got 2 different roads for both of these lot owners,
Oh yeah. Yeah,
and
so
then
you have to have
there,
easements.
yeah, and then there it goes to 3 roads, you know.
Yeah, that's a pretty awesome way though to develop land there. So so that you've got access and you don't have to deal with granting easement rights.
Yeah. Click on this real quick because I want to show the value of this. So we know that there's legal access to it. It's a nice big piece of land. It's residential R4. They're valuing it at 169,000.
Nice. So this is the one that sold for 60,000.
Yeah, 67,000, and it's about 8 acres. So here's kind of where it is on Google. We can kind of come down here and get a street view. The kind of road goes all the way back there, and it looks like the road goes all the way back to the lot, or at least, kind of right there at the lot.
Yeah, that would make sense. It probably does.
You can kind of see where the road goes out here, even looking at here, and then the lot's kind of right over here to the right. So it kind of goes, here's where the lot's at. It goes even all the way up to the top of the lot, or at least they're showing it does.
It actually looks like that area has been harvested of wood before and replanted. If you look at it, it at least from the other image we were looking at there, you could see where from right there, you can kind of see looking back in there. So maybe it's just past the area that we're looking at here. We can see where it's harvested up above it here, and they've replanted it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's probably all been replanted too. This stuff right there is still pretty full though.
Yeah, I can't tell if that's Christmas trees or what's going on there, but it does look like they were reharvesting the area. So it has value. Maybe it has use. Maybe that there's a lot of value in that wood as well. Here's where it pulls up on Redfin. So you can actually pull up this property on Redfin. They're valuing it at 214. There's the 8 acres, but in kind of looking at it, I think it's probably even worth more than that.
Yeah, so 60,000, they'll still do pretty well on this. They'll probably make 150 150 plus on it.
Yeah, well, and it's probably going to be a pretty easy sell. There could be additional uses at it. We'll look at just a couple more on another list, and then I'll flip it back to you, Shade. Look at the September list. And the first one we're going to look at is this one that sold for 101,000.
Yeah, so it started out at $5,800 and it sold for 101.
Yeah. Now here's the property itself, and part of the reason is, I mean, we can debate about how good a deal it was or why they paid that much, but it's this little house right here, and you can see that they are currently trying to sell it. So that was kind of interesting to me, going down here and looking at the sales information. We can see that they had it tried doing as a rental back in September. And then they listed it for sale starting in November at 280, and they've dropped it down to 225. And then they, kind of took it off or had maybe a potential offer, and then they just relisted it on the 18th, so just a day or two ago.
So if it was listed there, was that a September sale you were looking at? What I'm wondering is like, so if they bought it here from Georgia, they have a 1-year redemption period. So these guys are basically they're kind of rushing to get rid of the property right now or to get it sold, so they've got some kind of profit on it, right?
Yeah, they bought it in 2020, for
Okay, that makes
108.
sense.
And then maybe they lived in it, or maybe it was a rental, but they tried relisting it as a rental back in May, about a year ago, or actually even before then. And maybe they rented out and then relisted it. So these could be different times or not. But you can see where they kind of started at 19 and ended up renting it for about 1,800. And then starting in November, they listed it for sale for 280. And then they didn't price change it until, January of this year to 275. And then you can see kind of where the listing is. And then they took it off and then just relisted it. So they're currently trying to sell it for 225. And I'm sure that once it does sell, or if it does sell, then it's going to, they're going to earn their 20% on it. And so that's the reason I think the investor paid up, is because these photos are pretty current from them trying to currently list it for sale. He said, worst case scenario, I'm going to make 20% on my money. If not, I'm going to get this house for 100 grand.
Yeah, which 20% on your money on 100,000 is pretty good. Or getting the property for 100,000 is pretty good. So I could see that deal there on this. And yeah, going into it, you would have a little bit more awareness with this one. You can see exactly what they're doing there with the property and how long they've owned it. They probably did buy it and do a remodel on it, and so they probably invested some money and time into getting it fixed up there, and that's why they're initially trying to get 280 for it. But they're
Yeah.
being forced to kind of come down on the price because the market's not quite that strong maybe, and they probably spent a little bit too much on the rehab.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll just look at kind of this little group right here, and then I'll flip it back. But I thought these were kind of interesting. There's quite a few different lots right here that people really kind of paid up for. So you kind of see the same person ended up purchasing them. But there's 4 lots here in this Woodhaven Lane area. And you can see they started about 6 grand, and 2 of them got purchased for 75, and then 1 got purchased for 40, and 1 got purchased for 42.
Yeah, he spent like $200,000 on those lots.
Yeah, and I'll kind of show you where they're at.
Oh, I see. So they're we're talking oceanside here or waterside somehow.
Well, they've got something here, but there's a lot of water over here
There.
and kind of golf courses and stuff. So they've got
Okay, gotcha.
that might be kind of the floodplain that we're seeing there.
Yeah, definitely no ocean.
No, no, not oceanfront, but they are nice.
Yeah.
A bunch of new construction within the area. So these are all kind of new homes. You can see they're doing construction right here. All of these are pretty new. So it's kind of right here on the corner is that first one.
I wonder if this is a developer, or builder.
It could be, one thing that's interesting is one of these is already redeemed, so he made 20% on it pretty quickly. The other two aren't, because they're all for sale right now.
Could
The
just be,
person
yeah.
the person's trying to sell them, and if they do sell them, he's going to get just his 20%. But they're all $200,000 more plus each. So it's
Really,
this
yeah.
one.
So each lot's a $200,000 value.
Yeah, at least. I mean, here's this one right here. Is one of the lots. This is the lot that just redeemed. And so, it's sold for 128,000.
Oh, for 200.
285,000.
Yeah, yeah, that's a ton of money for a 0.7 acre lot. Wow.
Yeah. Here's the other lot they're trying to get 269 for. This lot they're trying to get 325 for. And so these are the lots that are currently on that this person purchased.
Wow.
And this lot they're trying to get 270 for.
Yeah,
So
so that's
it,
crazy. Every one of those, I mean, because they paid 50. I mean, even what they paid there at the 50 is nothing compared to the values on those, if they can actually, acquire any of those in the end. But even making 20% on everything they've got there, they'll make, 20 to $40,000 on these lots, or they acquire them.
yeah, they paid two of the lots, they paid 75 each, kind of the more expensive ones, the ones that are in the 300 to 325. Then they bought one for 40 and one for 42 grand. So worst case scenario, they're going to make 20% on their money. They can sit back, they don't have to worry about it. If not, they're getting a $270,000 lot to a $325,000 lot for a small percentage of value, and he's listing these aggressively,
Yeah,
because he's trying to sell them. So there's lots that they're asking even more than that.
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So overall, and what's kind of interesting is he already got paid back the interest on that one because it was a September sale, and you can see that they sold it in October.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty quick.
Yeah, so within less than, within 30 days, he made 20% on his money on that lot.
Yeah, that's hard to beat.
Yeah, so I'll flip this back to you, but I thought that was kind of interesting. So we've talked about, Georgia from a pre-sell where we go and look at the upcoming auctions, but there's still good deals happening looking at some of the sold properties as well.
Yeah, I'm quite impressed with those numbers. They look pretty good. You can certainly see why, why the investors are making the deals. The numbers work.
Yeah.
Uh, all right, next we're going to talk a little bit about bank sales. We're going to talk a little bit about basically how banks foreclose on properties, or how you can find properties at bank auctions.
Yeah, exactly. So, when we're talking about bank sales, there's a few different ways we can do this. We can do this through auctions. We can do it through REO properties, but right now is really a great time to get started investing in mortgage foreclosures, or what we call bank sales. In fact, kind of looking at the increases, there was a 13% year increase in the foreclosure activity in 2025. But as far as right now, there's between 35 to 40,000 foreclosures happening each month.
Yeah, in fact, and the discount that you can generally get on foreclosures is between 10 to 40%. And if we're looking at it specifically, people make about 67% was the average purchase price, per property in the foreclosure. So that's kind of where they give you that 10 to 40% range. Some properties can sell for less, some properties sell for a little bit more, but that's about where it averages out. And the advantage of that is we get to buy the properties and still have marketable title, which we don't get with tax sale properties. So there are a ton of benefits, and the profit margins are still really good.
Yeah, well, and some of those are selling for 50 cents on the dollar, and then you have some where the competition is fierce and they're selling for closer to 80 to 90 cents on the dollar. But like Shade said, it kind of averages out. But there's a few different ways that we can buy these. First, we can buy them through an online auction. This is where, we're going to things like Real Auction or auction.com or some of these other auction websites where the attorneys that are going through the foreclosure process or offering these properties up through some type of online auction. But in addition to that, we can also buy these as REO properties. And so essentially these are properties that were auctioned at the auction, offered at the auction and then didn't sell, but then can be purchased directly by the bank or through a realtor they're working with.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's kind of like an over-the-counter property, that went through the auction at some point, like with tax sales. It's kind of what it is here with an REO, simply one that's been through the auction. But there's also a couple other types of sales here on courthouse steps. There's trustee sales at courthouses all over, and we see those a lot of times as well. When we're dealing with tax sales. In fact, there's a lot of areas that still do their sales on courthouses for their tax sales and for their bank foreclosures as well. You'll see that. But the other one types are other government auctions, and these are auctions that are actually operated by the government or by some of these large entities that did a lot of lending and that have a large number of inventory.
Yeah, Fannie Mae, VA, HUD, those type of properties. And as far as being able to buy them, some of them will go to auction, some you'll be able to buy them from them direct. With bank and REO auctions, REO properties, these are essentially direct buy, where you're purchasing them directly from the bank or through their realtor. And even with REO properties, they're selling for about the same amount as the foreclosure properties, for about 67 cents on the dollar. And so maybe these didn't sell at the auction because the bank owed too much, but they're willing to discount the property to get it out from underneath them. And then with the online auctions and the courthouse auctions, these are essentially the first time they're going to sell, kind of like Shay talked about, where the others could be something more a little bit like an over-the-counter.
If we're dealing with bank foreclosures, though, a lot of our due diligence steps are going to be the same. The one thing that's different with it is because we're going in before and without any kind of true foreclosure taking place or wiping out or extinguishing any other kinds of liens or encumbrances, we need to do better with our title search, or basically we need to either have a title search performed, or we need to know how to find anything that's attached to the property in terms of any kind of liens or encumbrance. So things like a mortgage, we can discover and find through the records today. And essentially, that's how you're going to be able to find things that are up against a property. In some cases, though, if these properties are involved in a foreclosure, a title search has already been performed and oftentimes will be available to you as well through there. And so that's something we try to use whenever we can find those, whenever we see and have access to the title searches that they performed. But beyond that, the property assessment is much like we're going to do with the tax sale property, where we have to determine what the condition is like right now, and not necessarily, based on what we can see with the online information.
Yeah, well, like Shade said, if we're bidding on these properties at the auction, chances are we're not going to be able to get interior photos. Occasionally that can happen with REO properties, that can happen, but we really kind of got to judge the outside condition and do as much research as we can. Like Shade said, things are still going to stick to this property. It's not like a judicial tax sale property where it's going to eliminate other mortgages. If there's any other mortgages we need to check, then we need to really compare and find out what the market value is of this property. That's going to make a big decision on how much we're willing to bid on the property based on that market value. And then we're going to look into how many sales are happening, any type of zoning, how the city is growing. We want to get an idea of, is this going to be a good market? Because with mortgage foreclosure properties, you may pay more. In fact, generally we will, and we're willing to pay more on a bank foreclosure as long as it doesn't have a bunch of second mortgages or liens or encumbrances, because usually it's going to be a higher quality property.
Yeah, I mean, you can generally pay more when condition is better. And with bank foreclosures, you're getting a better quality property in most cases than you get with a lot of tax sales. Just because of the process, many tax sales, it takes a lot longer for properties to end up in sales than it will with most of your bank foreclosures, that you encounter. And so a lot of times, yeah, bank foreclosure properties can be in great shape. But the way that we need to determine that, though, is by doing all of that basic research. And the market analysis and the neighborhood review is actually kind of something we do at kind of the same time. We're trying to figure out the value of the property. We're also trying to figure out the health of the market there, so we can determine, if it's an area, if it's a location, if it's a neighborhood that we want to own property in or not. Because there can always be problems that can exist or that can arise if you don't check that kind of thing. And so it is an important thing to check for values here related to the property. Now, because we're dealing with properties that haven't been through foreclosure that makes them unmarketable, we still have marketable title, which means that we're going to have options for financing. There's going to be a number of different ways that we can get financing on these types of properties, and a number of different resources or places we can turn to.
Yeah, yeah. For the foreclosure auctions, when we're actually at the auctions, though, we're going to need to have cash for those. But like Shade said, there's going to be different money options when we're looking at REOs or some of these, FHA type properties. So if we're looking at the foreclosure, we can go ahead and we're going to need to use our own cash, or you can partner with another investor. But one advantage that we do have is once we've gotten that property, it's really easy to get a hard money lender to loan us on the property. So maybe you're able to come up with the cash, you bid on it and win the property, and you've got a hard money lender that's already kind of agreed that they'll go ahead and essentially, once you get that property in your name, they'll go ahead and loan on the property. So there's going to be more options. And then when we're talking about something like an REO, these you might even be able to get market rates on them, not higher interest rates. You may be able to get financing on them, even conventional loans. And so that's one of the advantages with REO properties, in addition to buying them at the auction. The auction is going to usually provide some of the, it's going to be the first chance that people get to bid on them. So if it's a real nice one, it may go ahead and sell in there. But with REO properties, these banks are looking to get rid of them. And that's the reason they're selling for about the same price, about 67% average, in value through the bank, because the bank wants to get rid of them.
Well, and that's largely too what's going to set the prices on a lot of these, is going to be based on what the bank tried to get for them there initially versus what they were offered on, and the best deals are picked up at auction. And so that's kind of why people will go to auction sometimes to pick these up, is because if they're going to get a little bit less than that, or if they're going to be able to get a little lower price, it's probably going to happen at the auction rather than somewhere like the REO, where the bank has basically just kind of set their bottom dollar on what they'll take there after they've done some negotiating and whatnot. So you might be able to get a little bit lower price here, I think, at the auction maybe than you might otherwise. But yeah, the benefit though is that it's like almost like any other real estate in a lot of ways when it comes to financing it. There's lots of strategies for bidding, and really this is probably more important than ever with the way that auctions are today, with how many auctions, with online auctions. You do need to have some planning that goes into your bidding and how much you're willing to bid. And in fact, this is something that we say pretty often, but if you're doing this right, you're going to lose a lot more properties, when it comes to bidding, than you're ever going to win. If you're winning every property you're bidding on, you're obviously paying too much because you're willing to outbid anybody that's coming up against you. That's kind of how you're doing it right, is if you're losing 75% of the properties that you bid on, that means you're probably bidding them down. You're probably trying to get them for a good price rather than overpaying.
Yeah, yeah. So we're going to check out and make sure we understand what is the after repair value, what's it going to cost. We want to estimate repairs, depending on the condition. We may even estimate 10 to 25% of that. If it's in good condition, maybe it's only going to be 10%. And we have other options with these properties as well, where we don't have to rehab them. We can sell them at a discount, still kind of be the middleman of the property. You pick it up there at the auction, and then you flip it to somebody who's going to rehab it, but get a good idea of what our profit's going to be. And that's what's going to help us determine what our high bid amount is going to be set at.
I like the middle option here where it says, psychological timing. It's, for online auctions, avoid early bidding that invites competition. Place strategic bids near the end, monitor bid extension rules. This is really such a good idea, because if you get too aggressive with the property early on, you can invite a lot of bidding early in an auction that can raise the price of that property up just far beyond what you would otherwise if you hadn't given the same property that kind of attention. And it's not that the property is not going to get attention, it's going to get attention one way or another towards the end, but you want to try to limit just how high up that bidding is going to go in any way you can. And if ignoring the property or trying not to bid on it to draw attention to it until the last 10 minutes of the auction, is what you do. It's probably going to be an effective way to at least ensure that the bidding doesn't get too crazy, or at least it's not. I guess you can't ensure the bidding is not going to get too crazy, but it's a way to at least minimize how crazy the bidding can get, or at least give yourself a chance there on properties that don't get too aggressive. That's how you're going to get properties at the best prices anyway, is if you try not to draw too much attention to the bidding and then you try to snag them at the end.
Yeah, I mean, that's always what we recommend to our coaching students is if you can bid live, bid live. If not, then bid as close to you as you can to when that auction ends as possible. So if you can jump on during your lunch and the auction ends in an hour or two, that's going to be the best time to do it. There's some things that we need to consider. We're going to get title insurance as soon as possible. It's going to be worth it getting on it, especially as we're buying a property through the mortgage foreclosure. Another thing to talk about it, and this is really kind of a whole training in itself, is the difference between judicial sales and non-judicial sales. So there's going to be some states that are going to go through a full judicial foreclosure similar to a tax sale. Now, the difference is the mortgages and those kind of debts can still attach to it, but these are going to be a court process. But they also have something that's called a non-judicial state. So it's so important to look into the different states, but for determining if you want to invest within that particular state.
Yeah, well, so there are certain states that don't allow they won't allow non-judicial foreclosures within their state. There's a whole bunch of states that don't allow them, and in those cases lenders have to go through a regular lawsuit to get their money back, and so foreclosure timelines vary pretty dramatically. We can see 116 days in Texas versus 3,000. Is that right? That's crazy. 3,038 days in Louisiana, which we're talking about what, like 9 years there or something, 8 or 9.
Yeah,
That is
I mean,
so long.
that's an extreme version. I was looking for the most extreme version, but this is the reason why it's so important to look into those individual states. And some states are also going to have a redemption period. That's something you need to consider as well. So, when you're looking at a foreclosure, every state is not the same. States can be as different as possible. I mean, and so that's the reason why when we are investing within mortgage foreclosures, there's some states that we're just going to avoid. And then there's some states that we're going to be interested in based on the fact that it maybe has no redemption period or a very short redemption period, a couple of weeks or a couple of months at the very most. And then also what type of deed is going to be issued. Now, regardless if it goes through a judicial foreclosure or a non-judicial foreclosure, we don't really care because to us it's going to be the same, but that's going to determine how long it's going to take before that property actually goes to the auction. Because with a non-judicial foreclosure, essentially these are states where they've allowed the bank to do a clause on it that allows them to do a quick foreclosure without going through the courts.
Yeah, well, and that's why the bank would like to do that in those cases, is just reduce the overall foreclosure time, and so they can foreclose there in 1 to 3 months, where judicial foreclosure states it's probably more like 4 to 6, or or longer, in some cases. But yeah, lots of things we can deal with. Existing occupants. Something you do need to consider when you're looking at properties, though, in different states from where you live, or if you're looking at picking up one of these types of properties, is just to look at the eviction laws in the state and understand what they are. In most of the states around, I think you've got pretty decent eviction laws here, and getting somebody evicted out of a property doesn't take too long. I've only heard of nightmares in a few places in California.
Oh,
And
in Seattle. I watched a
oh
video
yes.
this week about, in Seattle, there's somebody that's been living in this home for over 2 years, essentially just squatting. And the person has tried to evict him four times, already. He's going for his fifth eviction notice. And there's a whole thing involved with it where, he's getting some money from some charity, but the charity gets the money from the city. So, I mean, there's a lot of people, they've had protests outside the person's house, but it's kind of interesting. That's the reason it's important to look into that information as well. And then when we do our on-site inspection, we're going to look to see, is the property occupied? Can we see signs that the property is occupied, or does it look vacant? That's going to make a determination on how much we're going to bid on it as well.
Yeah. In fact, beyond that, some of the things that come along with buying this way is it is more of an as-is purchase, so you don't have all of the benefits of inspections. or having appraisals coming. It's basically a cash purchase there, as is property, which for tax sale stuff, we're all too familiar with how that side of it works. And so that's going to feel familiar. But we do need to make sure that any of the other smaller liens or things that might be attached to property, like outstanding property taxes, that's another thing that's going to need to be paid. If it's, of course, property tax at this point, though, they could be outstanding. You just never know when you go look at a property. It's always worth checking the small print there, or to see if they're including, or if they have something like, taxes could be owed here on a property, because Texas never forgets about their taxes, and Georgia's probably pretty similar.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of states out there where they may have 6 months or a year. It hasn't been long enough to go to the tax sale, but they could definitely be having it. So as far as once we've went to the auction, we're going to go ahead and submit the payment. Most of them are going to require some type of payment, wire transfer, cashier's check, cash, usually within 24 to 48 hours. That's something we're going to need to know. So we can't just go ahead and buy it and then hope to be able to get the financing. We need to have our financing in place. Once that happens, the trustee or the sheriff with the county will go ahead and record that deed and sell it there, record it with the county commission, with the county clerk's office, and then go ahead and offer it off.
Yeah, in fact, a lot of the important things we do from that point is about getting the property secured, and then we can start to, we get the property inspected, we can start to execute our exit strategy on it. So, or if we're going to fix the property up, we can get that, process started here on it for renovations or any kind of work that we're going to do on it. But yeah, from the time that you pay, until the time you get the deed, a lot of times is not very much time at all. But as soon as we have the deed in hand, though, we're generally trying to get the locks secured, trying to get the locks changed, get the property secured, so that we can get that process started here. It's when letters go out as well. Actually, I'm thinking here with the regular bank foreclosure, it's a little bit different here. These are properties that are mostly usable, and
Well,
ready to go.
there could still be people there. You might still need to send out, eviction notice, or see if we can work with them to find out when they need to be out. So the property's still occupied in those ways. We're still going to need to contact the person that's living in the property, the former owner.
Yeah, it's true. I guess all that stuff happens post sale, so it is a pretty busy time with these properties here post sale, when there's a lot to do.
Yeah, and then once we've got the property vacant, then we're going to go ahead and make sure we get an inspector over there. We're going to find out what needs to be done. We're going to evaluate that, and then start exiting our rehab strategy. If we're going to be repairing the property and rehabbing it to resell, or are we going to act more like the middleman and try to find a buyer quickly, where we can make some profit and then flip it to somebody else that'll do the rehabs.
Yeah, a lot of options here, and the general quality is going to be pretty good on these properties. And so, like Steve's saying, some of them may need work, some of them may be fairly usable like they are. Let's review some recently sold examples here of properties like these, and check them out. And these are in some of the most competitive markets. So if we look at some of the more competitive markets, you'll get an idea that there's money to be made in almost every market, I think, if you really dig down and look at it. But these are in competitive markets that are known for having high prices.
Yeah, exactly. We picked the most competitive markets, where we've seen real estate sell. So this is in the Miami area, and you can see that this property had opened up and had an opening bid of 443,000, and it ended up selling for 576,000.
Yeah, so it bid up some, and of course, the assessed value doesn't necessarily mean a lot in these places. In some sales, it's accurate, but not in this case. The market value on the property is closer to almost $1 million. It's $989,000, which it seems like a lot, but this little $1,500 house, has it. And because of that, the potential profit on this deal is like $400,000 plus. So it ended up being, really a pretty good purchase here that they picked up for half of value roughly. And, we'll just need to fix up, and it's not that big of a property to fix up. So, they may not have to sink that much money into it in order to bring the full value out of it.
Yeah, well, and looking at that assessed value, that's going to be the assessed value. The county is also going to have the market value. So in this case, I think the market value on it was 670 or something. and then the actual market value and looking at the comparables online are 989. So, you know, even if they put $200,000 in repairs or paying any additional debts on it, they still could make $200,000 rehabbing this property, and that's if they put $200,000 into it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of profit for any transaction with a house like this, and it's about as. And in fact, they could probably come out of it much better than that too, just because they bought it so well here in the end.
Yeah, I mean, this could easily make 300 grand, and that would still leave you 120,000 to rehab it.
Yeah. Here's another one. So this one here, it opened up here for 343. It sold for 580,000. If we took a look at the property here, estimated value on it's about 900,000. And so this is a property that has a potential profit of about 350,000.
Yeah, one thing that's kind of interesting is you can see that the plaintiff had a max bid of 356,000. So the bank was willing to kind of buy it at 356,000. They owed 343,000. So the bank was actually willing to pay more than they owed to try to own this property. That kind of tells me something about it, that there probably wasn't, and we'd have to look to be sure, but in looking at that, it would make me think that if the bank was bidding on it themselves, then there's a chance that it actually had some kind of, you know, it probably didn't have any additional mortgages or a bunch of liens on it.
Yeah, it's true. They wouldn't be willing to pay up for it if it had, if it had issues there with it. And so that does make sense here. Pretty good purchase again. Here's another one that opened up here. I'm not sure how much it opened up for here actually initially, but we know that the amount it sold for was 255.
Yeah, I think it final judgment amount, or the opening bid, was 483,000, and it shows the amount it sold for 255. So that, you know, we'd have to look a little bit more into. I don't know if the bank was willing to take more than that. You can see that the plaintiff's max bid is hidden. So this one was a little bit different. We'll probably have to look into the deed after it's recorded to find exactly what happened. But it almost seems like it sold for too cheap based on how good it was.
Yeah, it does make you wonder if it's one of those things where if you can't get at least that, the final judgment, or the judgment amount, if they don't reject it somehow, or if they still allow people to bid on the property, if it's kind of like an auction, if it doesn't hit the reserve, is that kind of the way that it works? I wonder in some cases. I mean, I know that properties that basically go REO after this, but it is interesting when it shows that they sell like this.
Yeah, in fact, I didn't even notice that it had the final judgment amount there being higher than the bid amount. You know, when I made this, I was just pulling them up quickly and making slides, but that is kind of interesting, and that's something that could be researched, because if it was purchased and it actually sells for 255,000, and of course, we'd need to check what kind of debts are against it. But it is interesting that, you know, the bank didn't have an opening bid, a bid amount that was that high. Now
Yeah.
these ones are a little bit more competitive. Denver is a really competitive area, but I think with a lot of these properties, you still have the chance to make, oh, you know, $80,000 to $100,000 pretty easily. That gives you plenty of rehab and additional cost. And this is what I think these investors are doing, is if they can make about 100 grand on these deals, I think it's worth it for them to pick them up and flip them quickly.
Yeah. I mean, these make sense as simple deals that way. I mean, the lender's starting bid amount on this one was like 335. It sold for 350, so 15,000 over. Basically the opening bid amount is really where this sold at, and they paid up, but it's a $510,000 house, and so 350,000. It's not that. They basically got a pretty good deal here on with $160,000 or so of profit potential still. And if you look at the property, it's a pretty new construction, which a lot of these are oftentimes. This one was not built that long ago, and so not the kind of property you're going to have a lot of issues with or problems with, especially if you're picking out properties like this.
Yeah, well, and you can see that it was built in 2016, so it was fairly new. And I think that what some of these investors are doing is buying them to use them as rentals. So it had all of these new photos in there that you could see before it went to the auction. In fact, several of these properties did. And so I think the investors are buying them to either use them as rentals or to turn around and flip them. So if you could buy a property like this as a rental and it's worth 510 and it rents out for a, let's say $2,500 to $3,000 a month. Well, that's going to be a good investment for you. And plus you have all of that built-in equity.
It's a good question here. Is cash, king here with these bank foreclosures? So, or do you get some time here for payment? And at least with the auctions, cash is kind of king, at least, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to need cash there. Most hard money lenders aren't going to give you money for a property that you're not going to win. Now, there's some that are out there that are willing to negotiate or do something, but the reason they're going to give you the money, essentially, they're going to be, you're going to need that deed. And so you could get hard money lending to refinance the property or give you money on the property afterwards. But really, there at the auction, you're going to need cash of some sort, unless we're looking at something like an REO where that could be an option.
Yeah. I think this property is a good example of it, kind of like the previous one too, where they pay up a bit. This one only sold for 15,000 over what the lender's starting bid amount was, so it sold for 353 and is valued at about 510. Really similar numbers here to the one before. Also a newer property here, built in '86, but the nice neighborhood's been lived in ever since as well, so it's in great shape. Where condition wouldn't be a problem. And this is another one where you could, all of these would work out really well for rentals, and I wouldn't be surprised if if you did nothing. If you had $10 million and all you did was just buy houses, especially if you're buying them from bank foreclosures like this and then making them rentable and renting them out and just hanging on to them, you would do so well with your money. You could turn that 10 million into a lot within 10 years.
Yeah, well, and this one had interior photos as well. You can see that the roof has been updated, even the windows have been updated. It's been repainted. And so, one thing that was kind of interesting on several of these properties is they were kind of purchased during the pandemic, 2001, 2002, 2003. So, they've been owned for a couple of years and then they've gone into foreclosure within the first 1 to 3 years.
Yeah. In fact, it's interesting too how you can see that past, how you can kind of see what's happened with properties in a lot of cases. The more you look at the records and the time frames when people bought properties, you can start to develop kind of a picture of exactly what's happened with the property and how it's ended up here, in either the tax sale or in the bank foreclosure here, about how long they had to pay it off. You can start to piece together, the history behind what's happened.
Yeah, this one ended up, they had 210,000 on it. That's kind of where it opened up. It ended up selling for 394,000. They paid quite a bit. One thing that was interesting as well is that there was some photos because they were trying to sell this property, maybe 6 months before the auction. And they ended up paying up for it, in my opinion, because it's still going to need some rehab. But I think the reason they did is this is a really nice area and the homes here are pretty valuable within this particular area of town. And so that was kind of my guess on why they were willing to pay up for it, because you can see that it's definitely an older looking house than some of the other ones we were looking at.
Yeah, I think it is a little bit nicer property, and it's older, but somebody has put some money into it already, and because you can see some of the things about the property have been updated and are new. So I think that side of it looks pretty good. One of the questions there is spot payment essential in bank foreclosures, or do we get time to say like 24 hours to wire payment or submit a certified check? I think they allow it the same way that kind of the tax sales do, at least in terms of
Yeah,
settling up on it.
they'll usually give you more time, but that's again something that you're going to have to find out from the auction company, the auctioneer, because they may, I don't want to say that there's none that are going to say immediately, but usually they're going to give you between 24 to 48 hours. But don't, you're going to need to check that on that particular auction before deciding if you're actually going to bid on it or not.
Yeah, now, like all real estate investing, due diligence is really important with this. In fact, in some ways, the due diligence is just as important and even more important when it comes to some of the stuff like the title research, because we don't have that foreclosure to be able to rely on. We need to know about anything that is attached to the property still. And so, other than that, we do have a lot more financing options here. Once you can get the property acquired, everything is a lot easier too. I mean, granted, if you're going to get property from the auction, there is the issue there of trying to pay for it. That's always kind of been an issue. But once you get the property in hand, everything is easier because you have marketable title with the property. And so everything beyond that will be like a regular real estate transaction, and you can use hard money lenders. It's much easier to borrow to get borrowers to lend here once you have the deed to the property as well.
Yeah, and I would assume, and I think that there is hard money lenders out there that would be willing to agree, kind of give you a pre-approval. Well, if you can get the house for this much, then I'll go ahead and wire over the funds. But you're going to have to get that all worked out and find a hard money lender that says, hey, I can pick up these properties. Let me show you some examples. Are you willing to fund the deal if I can win it at that price? And if they'll already agree to it based on your research, then there could be some hard money lenders out there that would be willing to do it.
Yeah. And yeah, title insurance, if it's an option, always get it. Always get it with properties that are eligible for it. We've come to really appreciate title insurance when dealing with tax sales. So yeah, title insurance is great. And move fast post auction is really good advice, just because that is when so many important things happen here following, the transaction, getting access to the property, getting the deed recorded here, getting in property inspected, and then getting that process started for either repairs or for turnaround.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So hopefully that gives you guys kind of an idea of the opportunity that's out there with bank sales. Now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about West Virginia. We try to find areas all across the country, so we're not always going back to the same state. And I think it's kind of interesting to do some videos and to look at some property at some of these upcoming auctions. So as far as West Virginia, they're classified as a tax lien state. Now, in some cases with over-the-counters that end up not getting purchased, they can be eventually forfeited over to the state, and then the state can sell them. But usually these are going to be annual auctions. It's going to be held by the sheriff, and it's going to be using the premium bid method, meaning you're actually bidding up the price of the tax lien. If it starts at $1,000 and let's say you buy it for $1,010, that's kind of that premium bid would be that $10 over the 1,000.
It's kind of interesting. They're kind of a simple lien. Only 18-month redemption period is kind of a short time period here for liens, at least comparatively. That's not that long compared to a lot of these, and the interest rate's not bad. That's kind of an interesting state. I'm looking forward to looking into it here a little bit.
Yeah, in fact, go back there real quick because there's a few points that we need to talk about. As far as their interest rate, they're offering a 12% interest rate, but they also require that after purchasing the tax lien, you're going to need to submit letters to all of the owners. So with a regular tax lien, usually they're going to be sending out notices, but in this case, you're actually going to need to be sending out notices to the lien holders, essentially letting them know. So this isn't just your normal tax lien. You're going to have to do some things. Now, they'll pay, or you can charge up to $500 for services that you have to do. So if you have to get an attorney to be able to do that, and they handle that for you, but there's additional steps that you've got to take with West Virginia tax liens. But there is some really good opportunity because they have a low interest rate. I mean, they have a very low percentage of taxes. The taxes are like not even 0.5%. And then also you have a higher chance of actually ownership.
That's right. I do remember this now. I do remember this with West Virginia, and the fact that they kind of do they push on some of the responsibilities, the things that the county would normally handle in most other states. The county kind of pushes on the lien holder and says, all right, now you need to send out these letters here. And yeah, that's kind of an interesting thing that happens here with these. Yeah, and I guess one thing that is nice with with properties that have low property taxes in general is just that even after years of the taxes accumulating, in some cases, the tax bills don't always quite get as big as they will in some of these really aggressive tax states, like, well, most other places we look at, like Florida, Texas, New York, almost anywhere else, that has a much higher property tax rate than 0.5%.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, they have really low competition. They have pretty decent properties, but there is additional steps that you're going to need to go through. But one thing that's nice about it is that we can get some of that expense back through some of the adjustments. And so if you pay that, then they add that to the tax lien and you'll be making 12% off that as well.
All right, let's do this.
I was telling Shade earlier, what was kind of interesting is I didn't notice that the ones that I was researching last night, the auction was today. I was thinking it was a couple of days away. And so I had all these ones that I researched that essentially uh, ended up getting sold today. But if you scroll down further, we can get to where the auction lists are. So we're going to start with that Grant County there. I believe Mineral County happened today and the list isn't there as well.
Okay.
So we're going to be kind of shooting from the hip here because the ones that I'd already researched, but we can kind of scroll down and look at ones that maybe $1,200 or.
Yeah, well, what's nice is we can see from the legal description about what each one of the properties are. When they're just vacant lots, we can tell, or if it's, several acres here. And here we can see this one. Here's 54 acres and something with coal rights. But a lot of these though are just regular land. If we want, now let's see, can we click on something here?
Yeah, click right there. And then you go over and click on the map to the left, to the or the satellite to see what this is.
Interesting.
And then we've got the address underneath the 911 address, or it's got the address there. Sometimes it won't have the address there, but it'll have the 911 address.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, there we go. And also, I might just copy that here while I'm looking there at it. Oh, look, we can click right there for the Google Maps link.
Yeah.
Right there as well on it. So that's pretty handy.
Yeah,
And
it's
so
pretty
the
nice.
lien we're looking at is, this was a lien for $1,300 is the lien amount. So not that much. We can see the area is taken up, and it does include, a house there.
Yeah, you can click over, see where it says on the far bottom left, click here for the partial report.
There we go.
There we can get kind of an idea of what the assessed value is. That's always not going to be a reflection of the market. We're just going to check that when it was built in 2000. So it's fairly new.
And we'll just pull the value real quick and see how the value compares to what the county's estimate is. And about 179. So that makes sense. And it's, in terms of an investment, the starting bid amount is very low compared to, $1,300 is a pretty low opening bid for a property that's, even for a lien, it's a fairly low lien amount for a property that's valued at 180,000.
Yeah, well, and one thing to mention as well as we're looking at these, as far as the deed process, you're going to be doing that through the auditor as well. So you're really working with the state auditor on these. You're going to be giving them the names, then they're going to be sending out the certified letters, but you don't need to go through a traditional foreclosure. So you're not going to need to get an attorney to do the actual foreclosure. You're just going to do the paperwork, kind of like a deed application to a degree, and then the auditor will actually do the foreclosure and issue you a deed.
Yeah. Yeah, that does not sound too bad at all. It's also not that long of a time period. In a lot of lien states, you're dealing with multiple years of liens to deal with. This is kind of a hybrid almost at 18 months. It's pretty short. I'm not sure if there's any other. I guess you've got a couple others. South Carolina has, I guess, a 1 year for liens, but an 18-month is just not a very long time period here to deal with for liens. We've seen redemption deeds that have a 1 year period here on them, so it's not that much different.
Yeah, well, we can see even there back in 2023, this sold for 140 grand.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting here. And some of these are for very small amounts too. We've looked at a couple that are larger, like the $1,000 ones, but a lot of these properties are $400, $500. Let's see, $484. Let's see what this one is.
Well, in this county, these type of liens, you might be able to pick them up, for pretty close to the opening bid, meaning you're not going to have a whole lot of competition in bidding up the premium, because there's probably going to be limited people there at this auction, where, at least you're able to pick them up where your premium bid's not going to be that high.
Like a 2016 mobile home on it, with this property is $500, is the amount. It's sitting on 2 acres.
Yeah, grab the address. Let's see what it values it at.
244, and you have interior images. 71 photos, holy cow.
It's outdated, but for that, I mean, still your investment's pretty protected.
Yeah, that's a cool old safe. I think it's a safe. Yeah, it's an old house. It's original there. It's kind of weird with the ceilings. Let's see, but manufactured housing, I think, or prefab parts of. Maybe it was custom built.
I think it's probably prefab. Looks like there could be 2 properties on it. Oh, maybe it's that shed or whatever. But it's a small tax lien.
Yeah, tiny tax lien, really.
Even though
Yeah,
it's an older building and needs a lot of work,
it's
what's
pretty big.
$500 tax lien on it? It's valued
Yeah,
at 244,000. Even if we say it's valued only at 150,000, we know that somebody bought it a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, and that's probably when these photos were taken, for
yeah,
140 grand.
yeah, yeah. I mean, very secure lien here. And all of these, I think, would be pretty secure. Oh, look, so some of these are mineral rights. You see mineral rights there, and you see mineral rights there. That's kind of interesting here. Most of these, though, are land.
Let's go look at a different county. Click on the next one down.
Let's look at Hardy County here. And yeah, they've got a big list. They have some larger amounts here. But again, look, I mean, there's 238 acres. That's something weird. That's mineral rights. That's what it is. It's 200. It's mineral rights for that fifth interest. Let's see. Let's look at one of these here. So this 5 acres here at this place. Let's see what that is. 2,500.
That's kind of a weird commercial property.
It's a
Like a big
humongous.
chicken
Yeah,
coop or something like that. Pig farm.
yeah. It's got to be. Yeah, it's on a farm. That's got to be like a humongous chicken coop or something like that, because that's. I mean, that's like a. It's like a 1,000 feet long. Yeah, or
Yeah,
500 feet at least. I mean, it is
yeah,
really
it's
long.
big.
Yeah, yeah. It's huge. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, they value it there at 270,000 is their appraisal.
Active farm.
And it was built in 2022, so it's a pretty new one. Yeah, so yeah, that's a $2,500 one. It's less than 1% of assessed value or appraised value.
Looks like there's a house on it too. 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Over to the left,
Oh yeah, there is right there.
the 3-bedroom, 2-bath house.
Yeah, so it's a house. So it's a house and this giant barn thing that's included there with it. The value on it could be quite a bit higher than what we're even looking at.
Yeah, it could be a $500,000 property at least with that. Oh, look at that. It's 42 by 624 feet.
Yeah, that's huge.
That thing is 624 feet long.
Yeah, that's some insanity there. That it's a huge thing for a $2,500 lien. That's just a ton of security for your money. Clearly, they're not going to let the property go for $2,500. They're going to end up paying it off, and you're going to end up making your money back on it. It'll redeem, and you'll earn a good safe rate of return.
Yeah, one thing that was kind of interesting is I was reading some stuff from an attorney that, works within this area, has clients that buy tax liens here. And he said that you have a higher percentage in this area of acquiring property than in other states. And probably the 18-month redemption period, implies, but there is, even though there's going to be extra steps, and you also need to be in the area. So if you're close to West Virginia, then this auction, these sales could definitely be worth looking into. Even though it's going to take a little bit more work, you still have a good chance of picking up property, and the liens like we're looking at are pretty small.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, these are all very reasonable, and a lot of them are very small liens. They'll be worth picking up. Yeah, I'm kind of impressed with the numbers. I mean, for the lien amount, for the bid amount, you're getting a ton of value in real estate compared to even a lot of other lien states that we've seen. The value is excellent here.
Yeah, well, a $1,300 lien may get you an $80,000 or $60,000 house in a lot of areas. So, the property taxes are pretty low here. It's the reason why we also see some smaller lists. You're not looking at thousands of tax liens, but these are also, probably in some more rural areas as well. We're not
Yeah.
looking in the biggest cities right here.
No, really. And you look at all the counties here that we could go through. I mean, we're only at Fayette County there that we're looking at, and there's quite a few more, that we could go into. All of these counties have listings.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy when you think about just how many listings there are here. All these counties have listings, and some of them have much bigger lists. I mean, this county has a little bit bigger list, but the numbers are roughly the same. We see liens in the hundreds of dollars. We see a few that are
Look at
they're
that one
larger.
that's 18,000. I want to see what that can get you.
Let's see. Oh, it looks. Oh,
That's a
if that's
new
a
house.
house, is that what it is? Is it a big old house?
I think so.
It's $1 million house. If it's just a regular house, yeah, residential, 4,332 square feet.
Yeah, big home. Newer too. See what the market value is real quick before we're starting to kind of run out of time here, but
All right. We'll look this up and then we'll move on here. All right. Let's see what it is real quick here first. Oh, no, look what it is.
is
It's a whole
that it? Or
building.
I think it took us down on a different property. I think it took us over to the right of that. When you looked at, see, go back, do the satellite, see? So it's that house right there.
Oh, it's the one right behind it. I see what you're saying. It's this one.
I don't know why the address took us there. It may be so new they don't even have addresses posted
Yeah,
yet.
yeah, they don't show any numbers on it yet. It's almost like that's.
Yeah, it's so new that Google hasn't registered it yet.
Let's see if anything shows up here. Like I type in the address. No, not yet.
No, it shows some ski resort.
Yeah, that's not. It's not even close here.
Well, if the county's assessed it at $1 million, I wouldn't be surprised from what we've been looking at what the county's assessed it at versus what the actual market value is.
Yeah,
This could be in a ski resort area.
yeah, it could be a resort itself. All right, let me jump over here.
We'll answer any questions. I think we have a couple of quick questions in the Q&A section.
All right, all right, let's see. Okay, see, actually, that was the one we talked a little bit about payment, with the foreclosures and when we get time. It is more like a tax foreclosure. They're really going to give you 24 to 48 hours in most cases. But again, always check to make sure before you participate in an auction, just whatever the requirements are going to be. At least I was just looking in the Q&A session there. I think we've answered most of those. So let's answer a few of these.
Yeah, so one of the questions was when acquiring land, and what they're kind of talking about is if I acquire a mobile home, you know, is the mobile home included, or is it just the land? And that's going to kind of depend on the state and also how the property's been assessed. So in some cases, if we're looking at a mobile home in a trailer park, and you were buying that mobile home, because this question came from one of the students on the mobile homes where you're just buying the mobile home itself. But if we're looking at through the county records and there's value for the mobile home and for the land, then it's being taxed as real property. So then the mobile home would be included.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, and that's the one sure way to know, is if we can see value that's included in that assessment for the mobile home, then it's a good sign that it's included. But if we don't see anything for it, and all we see is land, then chances are the mobile home was not included. But even so, though, one thing that we have noticed is that there are some tax sales that may sell mobile homes, but the mobile homes don't own the land they're on. But that doesn't mean there's not an opportunity there, because in many cases they've just been renting that lot, for whatever. The mobile home, though, you could still own, and you could still rent it out, and you could probably rent out the mobile home and continue to pay the lot fee while you own the mobile home and be able to turn it into an income property.
Yeah, exactly. Another question.
Oops, sorry, let me back up here. Hit the button on accident.
Another question is, if I purchase a tax lien or I purchase one in Pinal County, Arizona, is it a self-executing state? And it's not. In Arizona, you're going to have to contact an attorney, and then they'll go ahead and do the foreclosure for you. So it's not like a Florida or one of the other states where they do a deed application or they automatically issue you a deed. It's one of the states that you're going to have to do that through an attorney.
Yeah, you're basically responsible for doing all the foreclosure stuff there in Arizona and some of the other states like Arizona, where essentially the owner, the lien holder is the one that's responsible for all of it. So it's easier to hire an attorney so that you don't have to do it yourself, and you can get reimbursed for any attorney costs there to send those out. Should be reimbursed when the lien redeems.
Yeah, or if it redeems.
Yeah.
We have another question that this was on one of our videos where somebody paid $1 for a tax deed property. There can be some other fees, like you may have to pay a percentage of what you paid in an auctioneer fee, and there may be some type of deed fee, but usually they're going to be minimum. But with any kind of auction, we're always going to read the rules for that auction, and that'll help us know, because it can change easily from one county to the next.
Well, and we pretty much almost plan on about a 10% roughly auction fee. It's going to be in there somewhere. They're going to hit you for about 10% of whatever you're paying or whatever you're trying to buy. In a lot of cases, it's not unusual to get charged about that much for for an auction fee. And so it's a good question to be asking, because it's not a fun amount to get surprised with if you're not counting on it, you're not planning on it. So it's one thing to look at is to see whatever the auction fee is from auction house to auction house, just because it can vary a little bit. They're not all going to be 10%. They're not all going to be a lot cheaper. It's worth looking into because it can affect the overall cost by quite a bit.
Yeah, it's definitely something we're going to include in our cost when we determine our high bid. We had somebody that asked about waiting for the redemption period to expire. What are some important needed steps to block unknown liens? And truthfully, when we're purchasing a tax lien, that's not something that we're going to usually deal with until after the property is redeemed, or if we end up doing the foreclosure and acquiring it. Because let's say that there is some type of lien, like a city lien or something, you paying off that city lien, if the property redeems, you've essentially lost your money. So with the tax lien, we're really just going to hopefully, and usually they will redeem on the property. So we're not going to put a whole lot of research into it after, just because we're not going to make any money if we do. And chances are it'll probably redeem, even if there is some issues like that come along.
Yeah, even with the redemption deed, there are some limited things that we can do until we have the deed of the property in our name. Until the property's been recorded in our name, there's a limited number of things that we can really do with the property. I mean, even in Texas, maybe when we can take possession of the property, we're still going to be limited as to things that we can do that would have changes to ownership, or we wouldn't want to sink any money into the property because it still always has that chance of redemption until until that the redemption period's expired.
Yeah, we have one last question. Do you guys offer coaching? We do offer one-on-one coaching. If you're interested, you can go to the website and there's a link that you can click underneath the coaching center or set up an appointment. And we can go ahead and talk to you about some of the options with our coaching program and see if it's something that works for you and that you qualify for.
Yeah. Other than that, I think we don't have any other questions. At least we've been answering some of the questions as we've gone in through the training, and so I think we've got most of those covered up, or cleared out.
Yep, perfect. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed it tonight. We sure enjoyed it, and hope to have you with us back again next week.
Yeah, we will. We'll see you then. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks again.